Hey there, night owls and history lovers. Welcome back to another journey through the shadows of the past. Right now, wherever you're listening from, you're probably wrapped in blankets, maybe with central heating humming softly in the background, completely oblivious to the fact that 500 years ago, on a night exactly like this one, thousands of people were literally fighting for their lives against the cold inside massive stone fortresses. Picture this. You're standing outside a medieval castle as darkness falls, watching your breath turn to frost in the air, knowing that behind those thick walls, an entire community is preparing for another battle against winter's relentless siege. The temperature is dropping fast. Ice is already forming on the moat, and you're about to discover that staying alive until spring required way more ingenuity than you've ever imagined. Here's the thing though, you probably won't survive this. Not without learning their secrets anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love seeing how our little community spans the globe, all of us gathered here in the dark, ready to explore the past together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The year is 1347. Winter has arrived early, and you're about to learn what it really takes to sleep in a medieval castle without freezing to death. You push through the castle's iron-studded oak door as twilight bleeds across the sky, and immediately, the cold hits you like a living thing with teeth. But it's not the outdoor cold that shocks you. It's realizing that inside these massive stone walls, the temperature is barely different. The stones themselves seem to exhale frost, and you understand, with sudden clarity, that you've entered a world where warmth isn't just comfort, it's currency. And cold is the eternal enemy that never, ever sleeps. Your modern mind expects some kind of reprieve once you're indoors, but medieval castles were essentially refrigerators made of rock. Those romantic stone walls you've always admired. They're thermal bridges, conducting cold from the outside straight through to the interior. In winter, the stones actually weep with condensation, creating an environment that's not just cold, but damp, which, as any survival expert will tell you, is exponentially worse. The mortar between the stones becomes a highway for drafts, and every single arrow slit, every window opening, every gap in the masonry is basically a portal for winter to reach its icy fingers inside. You notice people moving through the corridors wearing more clothing than they wore outside. This isn't poverty or neglect. It's adaptation. The castle's entrance hall where you stand stretches up 3 stories, and you can see your breath forming clouds in the air. A few servants hurry past, their footsteps echoing off stone, and you catch a glimpse of what looks like fur-lined everything. Boots, cloaks, even what appears to be fur wrapped around someone's hands. The truth is starting to dawn on you. These massive fortresses that protected people from armies couldn't protect them from something as simple as cold air. But here's what historians often miss when they write about medieval castle life. The cold wasn't seen as a failure of architecture. These people weren't stupid. They knew exactly what they were dealing with. Castles were built for defense first, comfort second, or maybe 10th. Every thick wall that kept out invaders also kept out warmth. Every narrow window that prevented enemies from climbing through also prevented sunlight from heating the rooms. Every soaring ceiling that impressed visitors also created vast spaces impossible to heat. The medieval castle was a devil's bargain in stone and mortar. Safety from your enemies, but vulnerability to the elements. You follow a page boy deeper into the castle, and the temperature actually drops. This seems impossible, but the interior passages are acting like wind tunnels, channeling cold air through the entire structure. The boy notices you shivering, and gives you a look that's part sympathy, part amusement. To him, you're soft, unprepared, probably won't last the week. He's wrapped in at least 4 visible layers of wool and moves with the easy confidence of someone who's never known central heating and doesn't miss it. The walls around you tell their own story of the war against cold. You see hooks and poles installed at regular intervals, not for weapons, but for hanging tapestries. You notice patches of soot on the ceiling from portable braziers that have been carried through. There are worn grooves in the floor from where temporary wooden partitions have been erected and removed season after season. Every surface bears witness to centuries of human ingenuity, trying to make these stone giants livable. What strikes you most is the smell. It's not unpleasant exactly, but it's thick with smoke, wool, and something else. Herbs, you realize. Rosemary, lavender, and sage have been scattered everywhere, not just for their scent, but because medieval people believed certain herbs could actually generate warmth. They weren't entirely wrong. The oils in some herbs do create a warming sensation on the skin, and the psychological effect of pleasant aromas in a harsh environment shouldn't be underestimated. As you reach a narrow doorway, the page boy stops and gestures for you to wait. Through the opening you can hear voices, lots of them, and something else. A crackling, roaring sound that makes your cold bones ache with longing. The great hall is just beyond, and from the sound of it, they've got a fire going that could roast an ox, which, you'll soon learn, is exactly what it's doing. The boy disappears through the doorway, leaving you alone in the corridor. The stones under your feet are so cold, they seem to pull heat through your boots. You stamp your feet, trying to restore circulation, and the echo bounces through the passage like laughter. Above you, through a narrow window slit, you can see the first stars appearing in a clear sky. It's going to be a brutal night, well below freezing, and you're beginning to understand that everyone in this castle knows it. Then the boy returns, beckoning you forward with unexpected urgency. As you step through the doorway into the great hall, the wall of heat hits you so suddenly you actually gasp. But it's not just the temperature that takes your breath away. It's the sight of how medieval people really survived their nights. You enter the great hall and immediately understand that you've stumbled into a carefully orchestrated human ecosystem, built entirely around one massive hearth. The fire pit stretches nearly 8 feet across, flames reaching up toward a blackened stone hood that funnels smoke toward the roof, though plenty still escapes into the room, creating a permanent haze at ceiling level. But what mesmerizes you isn't the fire itself. It's the hundreds of bodies arranged around it in concentric circles, like a human solar system, each orbit representing a different social rank. Closest to the flames, on actual chairs and benches, sit the Lord's family and their most honored guests. They're perhaps 6 feet from the hearth, close enough that the left sides of their faces glow orange, while the right sides remain in shadow. Behind them, still within the fire's immediate reach, lesser nobility and important household officials sit on lower stools or cushions. Then comes a fascinating sight. Rows of people sitting on the floor, but not randomly. They're arranged with almost mathematical precision, each person knowing exactly where they belong in this thermal hierarchy. The mathematics of warmth here are brutal and simple. Every foot away from the fire drops the temperature significantly. By the time you reach the walls, where the lowest servants huddle, it's perhaps 40 degrees colder than the inner circle. You watch one young servant girl try to edge closer to the warmth, only to be firmly pushed back by an older woman who whispers something sharp in her ear. The girl retreats, wrapping her thin cloak tighter, accepting her place in the cold exterior orbit. But here's what's remarkable. This isn't chaos. This is a system refined over centuries. You notice that people rotate positions throughout the evening. Groups of servants take turns warming themselves by carrying dishes to the high table, lingering just long enough to thaw their fingers before returning to the frigid edges. It's a dance, really. Everyone moving in practiced patterns, that maximize their exposure to heat while maintaining the rigid social structure. The fire itself is a magnificent beast, consuming entire tree trunks that take 4 men to carry. A grizzled man, the firekeeper, tends it with long iron tools, his face permanently reddened from decades of standing close to flames. He reads the fire like a language, adding wood just before it's needed, banking coals to create heat reservoirs that will last through the night. You realize he's probably the most important person in the castle right now. If he fails, people could literally die before dawn. Near the fire, suspended on a complex system of chains and hooks, an entire pig revolves slowly, fat dripping and sizzling onto the coals below. The smell is intoxicating, but you notice something else. The cooking meat is adding humidity to the air, making the heat feel more penetrating. Medieval people might not have understood the physics, but they knew that roasting meat over the main fire made the hall feel warmer. What surprises you most is the sleeping arrangement beginning to take shape. As the evening meal winds down, servants start pulling out rolls of fabric from behind benches, from under tables, from every conceivable storage space. These are pallets, crude mattresses stuffed with straw, hay, or if you're lucky, wool. They're laying them out in those same concentric circles, maintaining the social order, even in sleep. The nobility will retire to private chambers, but everyone else, knights, servants, guests, even some merchants, will sleep right here in the hall. You count roughly 200 people preparing for bed in this one room. The noise is incredible. Coughing, talking, arguing over spots, children crying, dogs barking. And yet there's an underlying cooperation you didn't expect. People are sharing blankets, combining body heat, arranging themselves in groups for maximum warmth. Families cluster together. Servants form small pods, and you see several people negotiating to share pallets. Not from affection, but from pragmatic recognition that 2 bodies under 1 blanket survive better than 2 people freezing separately. A minor fight breaks out when someone tries to claim a spot too close to the fire for their station. It's resolved quickly by a stern-looking steward who simply points to a colder spot near the wall. The offender slinks away, but you notice others quietly making room for him in their group. There's cruelty in this system, but also mercy. Everyone knows that while rank determines your distance from the fire, death from cold serves no one. The strangest sight is the dogs. There are at least 30 of them, from massive wolfhounds to tiny ratters, and they seem to know exactly where they belong in this human arrangement. The noble hounds curl up near their masters' spots, while the working dogs find spaces among the servants. But you notice something clever. Many servants are actively collecting dogs, bribing them with food scraps to sleep nearby. A living dog generates about as much heat as a small fire, and unlike fire, dogs don't need constant tending. As darkness fully takes hold outside, the transformation of the Great Hall is nearly complete. What was a dining room an hour ago is now a dormitory. What was a social space is now a survival shelter. The last preparations are underway. People are removing their boots but keeping on their wool socks, loosening outer garments but not removing them, positioning themselves with their heads away from the drafts that sweep across the floor. An old woman near you starts stuffing dried herbs into her palate, and when she sees you watching, she grins toothlessly. "Feverfew and mugwort," she says, "keeps the cold from settling in your bones." You're not sure if she means medicinally or magically, but at this point, you'll take either. You watch a servant boy scatter fresh rushes across the floor, and suddenly realize you've been completely wrong about medieval flooring. These aren't just random plants thrown down in lieu of proper carpets. This is sophisticated insulation technology, hiding in plain sight. The boy is laying them in specific patterns, creating layers that trap air between them, and he's mixing in dried meadowsweet, pennyroyal, and warming herbs that release their oils when crushed underfoot. Each footstep will activate these natural heating elements throughout the night. The rush system is actually genius. Fresh rushes are laid down about 6 inches thick, creating a barrier between sleeping bodies and the frozen stone floor. But here's what you didn't expect. They're not changed daily like you might think. Instead, new layers are added on top of old ones throughout the winter, building up a compressed mat that can reach 2 feet thick by February. Yes, it harbors fleas and rats and God knows what else, but it also creates a surprisingly effective insulation layer that can mean the difference between waking up or not. You kneel down and push your hand into the rushes, feeling the temperature difference immediately. The top layer is cool but dry. The middle layer holds a moderate temperature, and deep down near the stone, while cold, it's nothing like the bone-freezing chill of bare floor. The accumulated oils from months of herbs, the compressed organic matter, the countless footsteps, it's all created a kind of primitive underfloor heating, powered by decomposition and compression. A middle-aged woman approaches with an armload of straw-stuffed sacks, and you realize these are the actual mattresses most people will sleep on. She shows you how to position one properly, not flat, but slightly folded to create a depression that will trap body heat. The straw inside isn't random either. It's been selected and dried specifically for bedding, mixed with dried bracken and heather that have natural insect-repelling properties. She demonstrates how to fluff it just right, creating air pockets that will hold warmth. The social hierarchy of sleeping arrangements becomes even more apparent as people claim their spots. The choice positions aren't just near the fire, they're also against internal walls that have absorbed heat during the day, away from external walls that weep with condensation, and crucially, away from the direct paths of drafts that sweep across the hall like invisible rivers of ice. You can actually see these drafts now, made visible by the smoke from the fire, and people are arranging their pallets to avoid these streams of cold air with the precision of generals planning a battle. What's fascinating is watching how families and groups create micro-environments within the larger hall. They're using cloaks and blankets to construct small windbreaks, positioning bags and bundles to create walls, essentially building tiny fortifications against the cold. Children are being placed in the center of family groups, surrounded by adult bodies that will radiate heat inward throughout the night. It's not just practical, it's instinctive. The same way emperor penguins huddle with their young in the center. You notice several servants dragging in large wickerwork screens, positioning them strategically around the hall. These aren't for privacy. They're for directing the flow of warm air from the fire and blocking the worst of the drafts. The placement is clearly based on years of experience. They know exactly where the cold spots are, where the wind whistles through gaps in the stone, where the morning sun will first bring relief. A young mother is preparing her family's sleeping spot, and her methodical approach is mesmerizing. First, she lays down a thick layer of additional rushes in their designated area. Then comes a large piece of oiled cloth, probably the family's most valuable possession after their clothes. On top of this goes their pallet, stuffed so full it's almost round. Then she produces something unexpected, a collection of smooth river stones that have been sitting by the fire all evening. She wraps each one in scraps of wool and tucks them into the bedding. Poor man's warming pan, she explains when she catches you staring. The smells in the hall are becoming overwhelming. Smoke, unwashed bodies, dogs, food, and those herbs. Always those herbs. But you're starting to understand that this thick atmosphere actually serves a purpose. The smoke, unpleasant as it is, creates a layer of warm air at ceiling level that acts as a kind of thermal blanket. The humidity from all those breathing bodies prevents the air from becoming too dry, which would make the cold feel even more bitter. Even the smell of the dogs and unwashed humans might serve a psychological purpose. In complete darkness, these familiar scents would be reassuring. confirming you're not alone. An elderly man is teaching his grandson how to wrap himself properly for sleep. It's not just throwing on blankets. There's a technique. First, the boy keeps on his wool tunic and hose. Then comes a second layer, a kind of sleeping shirt that's been warming by the fire. Then he's shown how to wrap his cloak around himself in a specific way that creates maximum air pockets while still allowing movement. Finally, a blanket over all, tucked under the body to create a seal. The old man demonstrates how to cover your head while still being able to breathe freely. Apparently, many people suffocated in their sleep from improper wrapping. As more people settle in for the night, you begin to see patterns in how they position themselves. Everyone sleeps fully clothed, sometimes in everything they own. Couples and families interlock their bodies in ways that maximize shared surface area. Some people are actually tying themselves together with strips of cloth to prevent separation during sleep. It looks uncomfortable to modern eyes, but comfort isn't the goal here. Survival is. You're about to witness something that will completely shatter your assumptions about medieval beds when a sergeant at arms approaches you with unexpected news. The Lord has granted you permission to observe the preparation of a noble bedchamber. You follow him up a spiraling stone staircase, and with each step upward, you feel the temperature drop another degree. By the time you reach the third floor, your breath is coming out in thick white clouds, and frost actually glitters on the stone walls. The chamber door opens to reveal what looks like a wooden room built inside a stone room. This is a 4-poster bed, but not the decorative furniture piece you know from museums. This is a survival apparatus, disguised as luxury. The posts rise 8 feet high, supporting a wooden canopy called a tester, and the entire structure is draped with layers upon layers of heavy fabric, wool, velvet, and even tapestries that probably cost more than a peasant would see in a lifetime. The bed curtains aren't for privacy, or rather, privacy is just a fortunate side effect. These massive drapes, some as thick as your thumb, create a room within a room within a room. A triple-layered defense against the cold. When fully drawn, they trap the body heat of the occupants in a space not much larger than a modern closet. You watch as a chambermaid demonstrates how they close, using horn rings that slide along wooden poles, sealing gaps with overlapping fabric that's been treated with beeswax to block drafts. But the real revelation is when they pull back the curtains to show you the bed itself. The mattress is a work of art and engineering. The base is a network of ropes woven between the frame, the origin of the phrase, "sleep tight," as these ropes need regular tightening. On top of this is a straw-filled pallet for foundation, then a feather bed that's almost 2 feet thick, stuffed with thousands of goose down feathers that trap air like nothing else available in the medieval world. The bed is so high off the ground that there's a special stepping stool to climb into it, and you realize this height isn't just for grandeur. Cold air sinks, and by raising the sleeping surface 4 feet off the floor, the occupants escape the worst of the ground-level chill. The space under the bed isn't wasted either. You spot a trundle bed where a personal servant will sleep, their body heat rising to warm their master above, while benefiting from the slight shelter the bed frame provides. A lady's maid arrives carrying what looks like a long-handled copper pan with a lid, and you're about to see one of the most crucial nighttime rituals in the castle. This is a warming pan, and she's been heating it by the fire for the last hour. Inside are glowing coals from the hearth, not flaming, but radiating steady heat. She lifts the heavy bed covers and begins moving the pan slowly between the sheets, holding each position for about 30 seconds before moving to the next spot. The precision of her movements tells you she's done this thousands of times. She starts at the foot of the bed and works her way up, paying special attention to where the Lord's feet and back will rest. The sheets actually steam slightly as the pan passes over them, and you realize they must have been nearly frozen before this process. She explains that timing is everything. Too early, and the warmth dissipates before the Lord retires. Too late, and the sheets are still cold when he climbs in. What happens next surprises you even more. The maid produces several leather bottles, primitive hot water bottles filled with heated water from the kitchen, but she doesn't place them randomly. Each goes to a specific spot based on the Lord's preferences and health conditions. One at his feet because he suffers from poor circulation. One near his kidneys because medieval medicine believes that's where cold enters the body. And one near his chest because he's been coughing lately. The bedding itself is a complex ecosystem. First comes a heavy linen sheet, then a wool blanket, then another sheet, because wool against skin was considered unhealthy. Then a coverlet of fur, in this case wolf pelts sewn together. And finally, an ornate but functional heavy tapestry that serves as both decoration and an extra layer of insulation. Each layer traps air, creating multiple barriers against the cold. You notice something odd. There are herbs everywhere, sewn into little sachets hanging from the bedposts, tucked between the mattresses, scattered in the sheets. The maid explains that lavender helps with sleep, rosemary prevents nightmares, and meadowsweet keeps the linens fresh. But many of these herbs, you realize, also have mild antimicrobial properties. In a world where sheets might be changed monthly at best, these natural antiseptics were crucial. The windows in this chamber have a luxury most rooms lack: glass. But medieval glass is nothing like modern windows. It's thick, wavy, and set in lead frames that let in almost as much cold as they keep out. The solution? Multiple layers of defense. First, internal wooden shutters that close over the glass. Then, thick curtains that cover the shutters. And finally, as you watch in amazement, the servants bring in large wooden frames covered in oiled cloth that fit perfectly into the window recesses, creating yet another barrier. As the Lord enters his chamber, you see he's already dressed for bed, and his nightclothes are nothing like the nightgowns of later centuries. He's wearing a linen undershirt, a wool overshirt, thick hose, and a fur-lined cap that covers his ears. Over all of this, he'll add a heavy nightrobe once in bed. His wife, who follows, is similarly layered. They'll sleep in more clothing than modern people wear during the day. You descend back into the Great Hall, just as the real negotiations begin. And what you witness is nothing short of a complex social economy, where body heat has become the most valuable currency of the night. The Lord's solar might have its four-poster fortress, but down here, among the common folk, survival depends on something more primal: the careful, strategic sharing of human warmth. A burly blacksmith is holding court near a pillar, and at first you can't understand why several younger servants are offering him food and ale from their own meager rations. Then you realize, this man is a walking furnace. His massive frame and the muscle mass from years of working the forge mean he generates more body heat than 3 normal people. By morning, those who sleep near him will have had a markedly better night than those who don't. He knows his value and is negotiating accordingly. The politics of who sleeps next to whom are fascinating and brutal. Married couples have the right to sleep together, of course, but unmarried men and women must maintain careful distances that preserve propriety while not condemning anyone to freezing. The solution is intricate. Women cluster together in groups, with older matrons on the outside as protection both from cold and from any inappropriate advances. Young men form their own clusters, often organized by trade or military unit. But watch closer, and you see the real negotiations happening. That elderly washerwoman who everyone knows suffers from joint pain. She's being quietly invited into a group of younger kitchen maids who will benefit from her experience and herb knowledge while sharing their body heat with her. A thin, sickly-looking page boy is being taken under the literal and figurative wing of a massive cook who wraps the child in the edge of his own cloak. These aren't acts of pure charity, they're investments. That washerwoman knows every remedy for winter ailments. And that page boy's father is the stable master who controls which horses people can borrow. Children present a special challenge. They lose heat faster than adults, but generate it less efficiently. You watch as mothers create elaborate sleeping arrangements, positioning their children between adults like precious cargo cushioned for transport. Infants are tied to their mothers' bodies with long strips of cloth, creating a kind of primitive baby-wearing system that maintains skin-to-skin contact throughout the night. Older children are sandwiched between relatives or trusted servants, their smaller bodies benefiting from the thermal envelope created by larger ones. The dogs have become part of these negotiations too. A well-behaved, warm dog is worth its weight in gold tonight. You see a young scullery maid offering her dinner scraps to a large mastiff, essentially renting his warmth for the night. The dog seems to understand the transaction, following her to her sleeping spot and curling up against her back. Others are less fortunate, trying to coax the castle cats to stay, but cats, being cats, will sleep where they please. What's particularly striking is how different groups have developed different strategies. The kitchen staff, who spend their days near the ovens, have claimed spots along an interior wall that backs onto the kitchen. That stone has been absorbing heat all day and will radiate it back slowly through the night. The stable hands have brought in horse blankets, which smell terrible but are thick with lanolin that repels moisture and holds heat remarkably well. You notice an interesting phenomenon with the soldiers and men-at-arms. They're creating what can only be described as human fortifications, arranging themselves in squares with their backs to the outside, faces inward, shields and cloaks hung on poles to create windbreaks. It's a battlefield formation, adapted for a different kind of warfare. They'll rotate positions through the night, with those on the cold outer edge moving to the warm center every few hours. The elderly are both vulnerable and valuable in this economy. Vulnerable because their bodies don't generate or retain heat as well, but valuable because they know things. That old man over there, he's teaching people how to position straw in their shoes to prevent frostbite. That ancient serving woman, she's showing young mothers how to wrap their babies in a way that prevents suffocation while maintaining warmth. Their knowledge is buying them spots closer to the fire than their social status would normally allow. Some people are creating elaborate structures with their meager possessions, using cloaks, blankets, bags, and even overturned benches. They're building small shelters within the hall. It looks chaotic, but there's method here. Each structure is designed to trap the heat of its occupants while blocking drafts from specific directions. You realize these people have been sleeping in this hall for years, maybe decades. They know every draft, every cold spot, every surface that holds or releases heat. The most heartbreaking sight is the orphans and the truly destitute. Those with no family, no connections, no currency in this economy of warmth. They huddle near the door, the coldest spot in the hall, hoping for charity but often finding none. Yet even here you see small kindnesses. A guard tosses them his old cloak, too warm for his use, but still better than nothing. A kitchen maid accidentally drops a warming stone near their group as she passes. As the final negotiations conclude and people settle into their spots, you realize you're looking at a masterclass in survival cooperation. Every person here knows that their individual survival chances increase when the group survives. The man who shares his warmth tonight might save your life tomorrow. The child you help keep warm might grow up to be the servant who tends your deathbed. It's calculated kindness, strategic mercy, pragmatic compassion. You hear metal scraping against stone, and turn to witness one of the most crucial rituals of the medieval night, the parade of the warming pans. A line of servants emerges from the kitchen, each carrying these long-handled copper vessels like sacred objects, their surfaces glowing with contained heat. This isn't random or haphazard. This is a choreographed performance refined over generations, and timing it wrong could mean the difference between comfort and misery. The head chambermaid, the woman whose entire life revolves around understanding the thermal dynamics of the castle, directs this operation with the precision of a military commander. She knows that Lord William's bed must be warmed exactly 20 minutes before he retires, that Lady Margaret's feet get cold first, so extra attention must be paid to the foot of her bed, and that the elderly dowager in the tower room needs her bed warmed twice, once at sunset and again right before sleep. Each warming pan is a work of art in itself, made from beaten copper or brass, with elaborate engravings that aren't just decorative. The patterns increase surface area for better heat radiation. The handles are wrapped in leather or cloth to prevent burns, and some are long enough that the servant never has to lean over the bed, maintaining appropriate distance from their betters' sleeping spaces. Inside each pan, coals from the great hall fire glow like tiny suns, carefully selected for their heat retention rather than their flame. You follow one servant, a girl of perhaps 14, as she performs her rounds. Her first stop is the nursery, where the youngest children of the noble family sleep. She moves the pan in slow, deliberate circles between the sheets, and you notice she's counting under her breath. 30 passes for the young lord's bed, she explains when she catches you watching. 40 for the baby's cradle, as the little ones lose heat faster. The precision is remarkable. Too few passes and the bed remains cold. Too many and the sheets might scorch or even catch fire. The danger is real. You hear stories of castles that burned down from a single dropped coal, of servants whose skirts caught fire from getting too close to the pan, of children burned by overheated beds. The warming pan operators are therefore chosen carefully. Steady hands, attention to detail, and an almost mystical ability to judge temperature by the color of the coals and the smell of the heating fabric. In the kitchen, you discover the source of this nightly warming parade. A special hearth is dedicated solely to preparing coals for the warming pans. Not just any fire will do. They need hardwood coals that burn long and steady, without sparking. Oak is preferred. Ash will do, but pine is forbidden as it pops and could send an ember through the pan's ventilation holes. An old man tends this fire. His job to have perfect coals ready at exactly the right moment. Too early, and they'll cool before use. Too late, and bedtime is delayed. The logistics are staggering. The castle has perhaps 20 warming pans for over 300 people. Obviously, not everyone gets this luxury. The pans must be constantly rotated. Warm one bed, return to the kitchen for fresh coals. Warm another bed, repeat. The servants have developed a complex system of who gets warmed beds and in what order. The lord and lady first, naturally, then their children, then important guests, then elderly family members, then the steward and other high-ranking servants. By the time they reach the lower servants, if they reach them at all, the coals are barely warm. But the servants have their own solutions. You watch as they heat stones, bricks, even metal tools in the kitchen fires, wrapping them in whatever fabric they can find. These makeshift warming devices are passed from hand to hand, hidden under cloaks, smuggled to sleeping spots. It's technically theft. That heat belongs to the lord, but it's tolerated as long as it's discreet. A cold servant is a useless servant after all. The technique for using a warming pan properly is more complex than you imagined. The pan must be kept moving constantly to prevent scorching, but moved slowly enough to transfer real heat. The servant must work from the foot of the bed upward, because heat rises, and starting at the head would mean the feet remain cold. They must pay special attention to the areas where the body will rest, creating warm valleys in the bedding where hips and shoulders will settle. Some warming pans have special modifications. You see one with tiny holes punched in elaborate patterns. These release a thin stream of smoke that carries herbs meant to aid sleep or prevent illness. Another has a long spout for adding water, creating steam that helps with chest ailments. The Dowager's personal warming pan is silver, not just for status, but because silver conducts heat differently, cooling more slowly and providing a gentler warmth for her fragile skin. The children of servants watch this ritual with fascination and envy. They know that becoming a warming pan operator is one of the few ways to move up in the castle hierarchy. It requires trust. You're handling fire near the Lord's bed, and skill that takes years to develop. The best operators can warm a bed so perfectly that the occupant never fully wakes, sliding from consciousness into sleep without ever feeling the transition from cold to warm. As midnight approaches, the warming pan parade reaches its crescendo. Every available pan is in use, servants practically running between the kitchen and the bedchambers. The sound of metal on stone echoes through the corridors, mixed with the shuffle of feet and occasional curse when someone burns themselves. It's exhausting work, and these servants will be among the last to sleep and first to wake, as the morning will bring another round of warming before the nobles rise. You notice something peculiar as people settle down for sleep. Nobody is undressing. In fact, many are adding more layers, and you're about to discover that medieval sleeping attire is perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of castle life. Forget those romantic images of flowing nightgowns and sleeping caps. These people are gearing up like they're preparing for an Arctic expedition. A young squire near you begins his nightly ritual, and it's fascinating. First, he checks his base layer, a linen shirt and brace that he's been wearing all day. These aren't coming off. Linen against skin was considered essential for health, supposedly drawing out harmful humours while providing a washable barrier between body and wool. Over this goes a wool tunic, then another, then a thick surcoat. His legs are wrapped in wool hose, with a second pair pulled over the first. By the time he's finished, he's wearing more layers than a modern mountaineer. The reason becomes clear when an old soldier explains the philosophy. Your bed is only as warm as what you bring to it. There's no point warming sheets if your body is cold when you get in them. The clothing itself becomes part of the bedding system, each layer trapping air, creating insulation that will work in concert with whatever blankets or furs are available. The medieval sleeper isn't just in bed, they're wearing their bed. Women's sleeping arrangements are even more elaborate. You watch a lady's maid preparing her mistress for bed, and it's a 30-minute process. First, the outer court dress is removed, one of the few things that is, but immediately replaced with a heavy wool sleeping gown. Then comes what looks like a second dress, but made of fur-lined wool. Her hair, which might be uncovered during the day, is now wrapped in multiple layers of linen and wool, creating an elaborate turban-like structure that will preserve both warmth and hairstyle. Her feet are encased in wool stockings, then fur-lined sleeping boots that tie at the knee. The psychology behind sleeping fully dressed goes deeper than mere warmth. In a world where privacy doesn't exist, and emergencies, fires, attacks, sudden illnesses are common, being dressed means being ready. You could leap from bed and immediately function, whether to flee danger or assist others. There's also the matter of modesty. In a hall where hundreds sleep together, maintaining dignity means never being in a state of undress. Children are wrapped like little mummies. You watch a mother preparing her toddler for sleep, and it's almost comical how many layers go on this tiny human. First, a linen shift, then wool leggings, then a wool tunic, then another tunic, then a kind of sleeping bag made from a cut-down adult cloak, and finally, the child is wrapped in a blanket that's tucked and pinned in place. The child can barely move, waddling to their sleeping spot like a tiny, overstuffed penguin. But this restriction of movement actually helps. Less movement means less heat loss, and children who might kick off blankets in their sleep can't escape their warm cocoon. the materials themselves tell a story of medieval understanding of thermal dynamics. Wool is king, but not just any wool. The scratchy outer tunics are made from the guard hairs of sheep, water-resistant and windproof. The inner layers use softer underwool that traps air efficiently. Linen is always against the skin, because wool was believed to cause illness if worn directly. Fur, when available, is worn with the fur facing inward, creating maximum air-trapping potential. Every choice has been refined over centuries of trial and error. You're surprised to see several people applying what looks like grease to their exposed skin. Faces, hands, any part that won't be covered. It's a mixture of animal fat, usually mutton tallow, mixed with herbs. This serves multiple purposes. It prevents the skin from cracking in the dry cold, provides a barrier against drafts, and the herbs supposedly ward off evil spirits that were thought to attack during sleep. The smell is rancid, but in a room already thick with smoke, dogs and unwashed bodies, it barely registers. The headwear is particularly elaborate. Everyone, without exception, covers their head for sleep. The belief that most body heat escapes through the head might be a myth in our world, but in a medieval castle, an uncovered head meant breathing in air so cold it could damage your lungs. Men wear wool caps that tie under the chin. Women have elaborate wrappings that protect both head and neck, and children often have their heads wrapped so thoroughly that only their faces peek out. Some of the elderly wear what amounts to a cloth helmet, with extra padding over the ears, where frostbite was a real danger. Interestingly, the wealthy don't necessarily wear more layers. They wear better layers. Where a servant might have 3 tunics of rough wool, a noble has one of finest merino and one of silk-lined fur. The difference in insulation is dramatic. You touch a nobleman's sleeping robe and it's almost weightless, yet incredibly warm, while a servant's collection of garments weighs so much they struggle to move. Medieval wealth inequality extends even to the basic physics of staying warm. The feet receive special attention. Bare feet on frozen stone floors could mean death, so everyone has a foot warming strategy. The wealthy have fur-lined boots made specifically for sleeping. The middle ranks wrap their feet in strips of wool cloth, building up layers like bandages. The poor stuff their regular shoes with straw or dried grass, creating improvised insulation. You see one clever servant who has made sleeping socks from rabbit skins turned inside out, the fur against his feet, tied with leather strips. Some of the sleeping clothes have modifications you wouldn't expect. Slits and flaps in strategic places allow for relieving oneself without full undressing. Crucial when the garderobes, toilets, are ice-cold stone seats in tower alcoves. Women's sleeping gowns often have nursing flaps for mothers with infants. Men's tunics might have reinforced sections where swords would hang, as many sleep with weapons close at hand. The most elaborate outfit you witness belongs to an elderly knight who suffers from what they call cold bones, probably arthritis. His family has invested in an extraordinary sleeping costume, a full-body garment made from sheepskin with the wool still attached, lined with rabbit fur, with built-in mittens and foot coverings. It must have cost a fortune, but when he puts it on, he looks like a great shaggy bear. He'll sleep alone tonight. No one wants to share space with what looks like a wild animal. But he'll be warmer than most. As people finish their dressing rituals and begin settling onto their pallets, the hall looks like a scene from some strange theatrical performance. Hundreds of overstuffed figures waddling to their places, so wrapped in fabric they've lost human shape. But this is survival, and dignity takes strange forms when death lurks in the cold. These people will wake tomorrow with clothing damp from sweat and breath, stiff from sleeping in the same position all night. But they'll wake. In medieval winter, that's victory enough. You're about to discover one of the best-kept secrets of medieval castle heating, when a scholarly monk beckons you toward a narrow stairway you hadn't noticed before. "Come," he whispers, "let me show you something remarkable." You descend into the castle's underbelly, and the temperature rises noticeably with each step down. This seems impossible. Basements should be colder, until you emerge into a vaulted chamber where you're confronted with a technological marvel that will completely change your understanding of medieval engineering. The hypocaust system. This isn't present in every castle. In fact, it's incredibly rare. But this particular fortress was built on the ruins of a Roman villa, and some brilliant 12th century engineer figured out how to partially restore the ancient heating system. The hypocaust is essentially a central heating system that's been forgotten and rediscovered. A network of channels beneath the floors where hot air circulates, turning the entire floor into a giant radiator. The monk leads you to a furnace room, where two servants tend a carefully controlled fire. But this isn't like the chaotic blaze in the Great Hall. This fire heats air, not people. The flames warm a collection of stones arranged in a specific pattern, and as these stones heat up, they create a convection current that draws cold air in from outside and pushes hot air through the channels. It's the same principle as a modern forced air heating system, except powered by physics rather than electricity. You can see the channels themselves through a maintenance opening, hollow spaces about 2 feet high, running beneath the floor of the chapel and the Lord's private chambers above. The Romans built these with remarkable precision, creating a network that ensures even heat distribution. The medieval restoration is cruder but functional, using salvaged Roman bricks and their own stone to repair collapsed sections. What's ingenious is how they've modified the Roman design for medieval needs. The Romans heated their entire villas, but that's impossible with the limited fuel available to a medieval castle. Instead, they heat only critical spaces, the chapel, where people must stand still for hours during services, the Lord's solar, where important documents are kept. Cold makes parchment brittle. And interestingly, the garrison's armory, because frozen metal becomes brittle and weapons can shatter. The fuel efficiency is remarkable. One fire, carefully maintained, heats 3 rooms above. The servants feed it slowly, adding just enough wood to maintain temperature without waste. They've learned to read the system like a living thing. Too hot, and the floors above become uncomfortable, even dangerous. Too cool, and the whole system fails. The sweet spot is a floor temperature just warm enough to notice through boots, creating a subtle but continuous heat source that changes everything about those rooms. You climb back up to the chapel to experience the effect, and it's subtle but profound. The floor isn't hot, you could walk on it barefoot, but it's warm, and that warmth radiates upward, creating a completely different microclimate than the rest of the castle. The stone walls are still cold, but they don't seem to leach heat from your body the same way. People pray here longer, work here more efficiently, sleep here better when they're allowed. The monk explains that maintaining this system is an art passed down through generations. The previous heating master just died, taking some secrets with him, and they're struggling to maintain the same efficiency. They know that certain woods burn better for this purpose. Oak for long, steady heat, ash for quick temperature rises. But the old master knew something about airflow, about the dampers and vents, that they're still trying to rediscover. There's a political dimension to this technology too. The hypocaust system is a closely guarded secret, not because of enemy spies, but because of internal castle politics. If everyone knew that such warmth was possible, they'd demand access. As it is, only the Lord's family, the priest, and a few high-ranking nobles even know it exists. The servants who maintain it are sworn to secrecy, on pain of banishment. The system isn't without its dangers. Carbon monoxide poisoning was a real risk, though medieval people didn't understand it as such. They just knew that sometimes people who slept in hypocaust heated rooms didn't wake up, attributing it to evil vapors or divine punishment. The solution, discovered through lethal trial and error, is proper ventilation. Small holes in the walls that let fresh air in and bad air out, though this also reduces efficiency. You discover there have been attempts to expand the system. Ambitious engineers have tried to route channels to other rooms, but the physics don't work. The heat dissipates over distance, and the original Roman engineering is too complex to fully replicate. One attempt to heat the Great Hall this way resulted in a fire that nearly destroyed the castle, the channels acting as a chimney that drew flames through the entire underground network. The most fascinating adaptation is in the kitchen, directly above one section of the hypocaust. Here, they've modified the system to create a kind of primitive food warming system. Stones, heated by the channels below, are used as cooking surfaces, maintaining steady temperatures, perfect for slow cooking stews and keeping food warm for the irregular eating schedules of castle life. You run your fingers across an enormous tapestry depicting a hunting scene and suddenly understand why these massive wall hangings are everywhere in the castle. The space between the fabric and the stone wall is noticeably warmer than the room itself. These aren't just decorations or displays of wealth. They're sophisticated insulation systems that transform killing cold stone walls into something almost livable. The tapestry before you is 12 feet high and 20 feet wide, woven from wool so thick you can't see light through it even when held up to a torch. But here's what's brilliant. It's not hanging flush against the wall. Wooden battens create a 4-inch gap between fabric and stone, trapping a layer of air that acts as insulation. This dead air space is the same principle used in modern double-pane windows, discovered through centuries of trial and error by people who never heard the word thermodynamics. A master weaver who's visiting the castle to repair damaged hangings shows you the subtle engineering in these pieces. The bottom of each tapestry is weighted with lead strips sewn into the hem, keeping it from billowing out and breaking the air seal. The top is attached to hooks that allow it to be adjusted seasonally, pulled tighter to the wall in summer for less insulation, loosened in winter to create a bigger air gap. Some tapestries even have slits cut strategically to allow controlled airflow, preventing moisture buildup that would lead to mold. The placement of tapestries follows a precise hierarchy and practical logic. The exterior walls, those facing outside, get the thickest, most elaborate hangings. Northern walls, which never see direct sunlight, receive double or even triple layers. The Great Hall has tapestries arranged in overlapping sections, like massive cloth shingles, ensuring no cold stone is exposed. Even the ceiling in some rooms has fabric stretched across it, creating a cloth sky that traps rising warm air. But tapestries are for the wealthy. You discover that common areas use more creative solutions. Servants have hung old sails from the castle's boats, their tar-treated fabric excellent at blocking drafts. Kitchen staff have created patchwork hangings from flour sacks stitched together. In the barracks, soldiers have hung their cloaks and blankets in a communal wall covering that everyone contributes to and benefits from. It's uglier than tapestries, but follows the same principle. The manufacturing of these tapestries is its own industry. The best ones come from Flanders, where entire towns dedicate themselves to weaving. A single large tapestry can take a team of weavers 2 years to complete and cost as much as a small farm. But here's the economic calculus. That tapestry might save enough firewood over a decade to pay for itself twice over, not to mention the lives saved from winter ailments. You notice something interesting about the imagery on the tapestries. Summer scenes are most common. gardens in bloom, hunting in green forests, festivals in sunny meadows. The psychological effect is intentional. When you're freezing in February, being surrounded by images of warmth and abundance provides mental escape. It's a form of medieval virtual reality, using visual tricks to make the body feel warmer than it actually is. The maintenance of these hangings is constant work. Every morning, servants beat them with special paddles to remove dust and moisture. Once a month in winter, they're taken down section by section and dried by the fires. Damp tapestries lose their insulation properties and can freeze solid against the walls. The reversal and rehanging process is carefully timed to minimize the room's exposure to bare stone. Some tapestries serve double duty. You discover hidden pockets sewn into the backing, where warming stones can be inserted, turning the entire hanging into a giant radiator. Others have been treated with herbal preparations, wormwood to repel insects, lavender for scent, and surprisingly, a primitive fire retardant made from alum and vinegar. The castle has learned from tragedy. Previous tapestries too close to torches resulted in devastating fires. The acoustic effect is remarkable too. In the Great Hall, before tapestries were hung, echoes made conversation impossible. Now, the fabric absorbs sound, creating a more intimate atmosphere despite the enormous space. This has social implications. Conspiracies are harder to overhear, private conversations more feasible. The tapestries don't just insulate against cold, they insulate against the total lack of privacy that defines castle life. In the richest chambers, you find something extraordinary. Tapestries that can be rearranged to create temporary rooms. Using a system of pulleys and rails, massive hangings can be moved to partition spaces, creating a warm inner sanctum within a larger cold room. It's like a textile architecture, walls that can be rebuilt nightly depending on need. The guild secrets of tapestry hanging are closely guarded. The exact angle for maximum insulation, the optimal gap width for different seasons, the best wood for battens that won't warp from moisture. This knowledge is valuable. A master tapestry hanger can transform a freezing chamber into something almost comfortable, while an amateur might actually make things worse by trapping moisture or creating air currents. You follow the castle's chamberlain on his evening rounds, and he reveals something that will completely change how you understand medieval sleeping arrangements. The secret, he says, tapping his temple, isn't just warmth, it's location, location, location. He leads you through the castle with a torch, pointing out the invisible geography of temperature that governs where every soul will lay their head tonight. First, he shows you the worst spots, the death zones, as servants grimly call them. Near any exterior door, the temperature drops 15 degrees from the constant opening and closing. Below windows, even shuttered ones, invisible waterfalls of cold air pour down continuously. Along the northern wall, which hasn't seen direct sunlight since construction, the stones actually have ice crystals forming on them. Sleep here, he says, and you might not wake. These are the spots reserved for the lowest servants, the punishment zones for those who've angered their betters. But then he reveals the castle's thermal treasures. Behind the kitchen wall, stones that have absorbed heat from the ovens all day radiate warmth like gentle suns. The chapel's southern wall, which catches afternoon light through stained glass, holds heat until midnight. The spot directly above the stable, yes, above where horses sleep, benefits from rising animal heat and fermentation warmth from hay and manure. It smells terrible, but stays 10 degrees warmer than anywhere else accessible to servants. The geometry of heat in this castle is three-dimensional. Heat rises, so the second floor is warmer than the first, but the third floor, exposed to wind and with thinner walls, is actually colder. The sweet spot is the second floor, middle of the building, interior walls only. That's where you'll find the Lord's solar and the better guest chambers. It's not accident or privilege alone. It's physics. You're shown a servant's sleeping map, a mental blueprint passed down through generations. That corner where two interior walls meet? It's fought over, because walls that separate heated rooms are actually warm themselves. The spot behind the Great Hall's massive fireplace. The stones there stay warm all night, even after the fire dies. Under the main staircase, terrible, it's a wind tunnel. But the alcove beside the staircase is protected and relatively warm. The daily migration patterns are fascinating. In the morning, everyone in the castle shifts eastward, following the sun as it warms different walls. By afternoon, the western rooms are sought after. As night falls, there's a gradual movement toward the center of the castle, away from exterior walls that are now radiating cold inward. It's like watching a slow-motion dance, choreographed by temperature. Some spots have unexpected benefits. The guard post at the top of the tower is freezing, but the guards have discovered that by hanging thick cloth across the doorway and keeping a small brazier burning, they can create a tiny pocket of warmth. The garderobes, the toilets built into the walls, are horrible, but the shaft that carries waste down actually brings warm air up from the lower levels, where decomposition creates heat. The chandler's workshop, where candles are made, has walls permanently infused with wax that acts as a sealant against drafts. Servants who maintain good relationships with the chandler might be allowed to sleep there, surrounded by the sweet smell of beeswax and tallow. The brewery, with its fermenting vats generating constant low heat, is another prime location, though the yeast in the air makes some people sick. Window placement creates unique microclimates. East-facing windows are coldest at night, but warm quickly at dawn. West-facing windows hold evening heat longest. South-facing windows in upper floors can actually make rooms too warm on sunny winter days, requiring ventilation. North-facing windows are death sentences. Rooms with only northern exposure are often abandoned in winter entirely. The castle's irregular architecture creates thermal anomalies. That weird triangular room created by the junction of two building phases, it has 3 exterior walls and is basically uninhabitable in winter. But the round tower room directly above the kitchen chimney, it's the warmest spot in the castle outside the Lord's chambers, and the cook guards it jealously for his own family. Seasonal furniture arrangement is an art form. In summer, beds are placed near windows for airflow. Come winter, everything migrates toward interior walls. Heavy furniture is positioned to block drafts. Benches that serve as summer seating become winter windbreaks. Even the rushes on the floor are arranged differently. Thicker near exterior walls, thinner near heat sources. The smart servants have developed a marking system. Small scratches on walls indicate good sleeping spots. Warnings about drafts. Notes about seasonal changes. It's a secret language of survival that the nobility never notices. That cluster of scratches might mean warm until midnight when fire dies, or draft from crack in mortar starting in November. The politics of position become more complex when you realize that some people deliberately choose colder spots. The elderly priest sleeps in a freezing cell as penance. Young lovers meet in cold alcoves where no one else ventures. Thieves prefer spots near doors, despite the cold, for quick escape. The castle's thermal map is also its social and moral map. You hear whimpering from the corner of the Great Hall, and turn to see something that would horrify modern sensibilities, but makes perfect medieval sense. A young child is being tied to a large wolfhound for the night. Before you can react in alarm, an elderly nurse explains, "The dog won't roll over on him like his drunk father might, won't steal his blanket like other children would, and will keep him warmer than 3 wool cloaks." This is the reality of animal heat companions in medieval castles. Not just pets, but survival partners. The economics of animal warmth are surprisingly complex. Dogs aren't just randomly allowed in the castle. There's a strict hierarchy. The Lord's hunting hounds, massive deer hounds and wolfhounds, sleep in the Great Hall. near their master's spot when he's present, or with favoured servants who maintain them. These dogs are worth fortunes, and their warmth is a privilege to share. The working dogs, ratters, guard dogs, kitchen turnspits, are distributed based on need and negotiation. The castle's cats, meanwhile, follow their own inscrutable logic, though servants try desperately to lure them with food and warm spots. You watch a stable boy smuggle a barn cat into the hall under his cloak. Cats are technically not allowed in sleeping areas. Some religious concern about them being familiars of witches, but everyone turns a blind eye on cold nights. A good mouser, who's also willing to sleep with humans, is invaluable. Their body temperature runs higher than humans, about 102 degrees, and unlike dogs, they don't need to go out in the middle of the night. The really surprising discovery is the livestock arrangement. In the poorest sections of the castle's outer buildings, you find people literally sleeping with their animals. A small chamber attached to the stable houses a family who has built their beds on a platform above their 2 cows. The animals' body heat rises, warming the humans above, while the humans' presence calms the animals. The smell is overwhelming, but the temperature difference is remarkable, perhaps 20 degrees warmer than similar rooms without animals. Chickens, you learn, are prized as foot warmers. Several servants have small cages near their pallets where chickens roost at night. The birds generate surprising heat, and their eggs in the morning are payment for the accommodation. One clever woman has trained her hens to actually sleep on her feet, creating living slippers. The roosters are banned, obviously. Their dawn crowing would wake the entire castle. The relationship between humans and animals for warmth has created unique bonds. You see a massive war dog that absolutely will not sleep unless a particular page boy is curled against him. The boy explains that he raised the dog from a puppy, sleeping with it every night, and now they're inseparable. The dog's value as a war animal means the boy's position is secure. No one would risk disturbing the dog's sleep by relocating the boy. In the mews where the hunting birds are kept, the falconers sleep directly below the perches. Bird body temperature is even higher than mammals, around 106 degrees. And while individual birds don't generate much heat, dozens of them together create a noticeably warmer environment. The falconers have to deal with droppings, but they've developed a system of canvas sheets that can be changed daily, while still benefiting from the warmth above. The horses in the stable represent the castle's largest heat reservoir. A single horse generates as much heat as a small fire, and the stable with its 40 horses is actually one of the warmest buildings in the castle complex. The grooms and stable boys sleep in the loft above, where hay insulation combines with rising animal heat to create almost comfortable conditions. The trade-off is the constant noise. Horses don't sleep through the night like humans, and the ever-present risk of fire from knocked-over lanterns. Some animals are specifically kept for warmth rather than food or work. You discover a room where rabbits are raised, and at night, their cages are brought into the servants' quarters. Rabbit fur is valuable, but living rabbits are worth more on cold nights. They're passed around in rotation. Tonight, the scullery maids get the rabbits, tomorrow the laundry women. It's a careful economy managed by a senior servant who tracks who's had animal warmth and for how long. The dogs themselves have developed survival strategies. You notice they preferentially seek out the elderly and infirm to sleep with. At first, this seems like kindness, but then you realize these people don't move much in their sleep, providing stable warmth without the restless tossing that younger sleepers inflict. The dogs have learned to identify good sleep partners, just as humans have learned to identify good animal companions. There's even a medical component to animal warmth. The castle's healer insists that certain animals provide healthful benefits beyond mere heat. Cats supposedly draw out evil humors. Dogs prevent nightmares. And sleeping with a lamb can cure respiratory ailments. Whether true or not, the psychological comfort of a warm, living presence in the terrifying darkness of a medieval night shouldn't be underestimated. The most unusual arrangement you witness is in the dovecote. where an old woman has been given permission to sleep. She tends the doves that provide meat and eggs for the Lord's table. But more importantly, she's discovered that the birds will roost directly on her if she remains still. By morning, she's covered in a living blanket of doves, their collective warmth keeping her alive through nights that would otherwise kill someone her age. You witness something remarkable as midnight approaches. What looked like random clustering of sleeping bodies is actually revealing itself as a complex social economy where warmth is currency, body heat is negotiable, and survival depends on carefully maintained alliances. The negotiations you saw earlier were just the beginning. Now you're seeing the full execution of these thermal contracts. A young widow with 3 children has positioned her family strategically. She's made agreements with 2 elderly spinsters. They get the warmth of the children sandwiched between them, while she gets their protection and their knowledge of healing herbs when the children inevitably fall sick from the cold. But there's more to it. One of the spinsters is the castle laundress's sister, which means this widow will get her family's clothes dried closest to the fire, while the other is related to the cook, ensuring extra scraps find their way to the children. It's a web of mutual survival that extends far beyond just sharing warmth. The unmarried men have formed what amounts to thermal guilds. The blacksmith's apprentices sleep together, their bodies still radiating forge heat from the day's work. The carpentry apprentices cluster near them, offering their wool shavings as extra insulation in exchange for proximity to those human furnaces. The young soldiers form their own pod, maintaining military discipline even in sleep. They'll rotate positions through the night, ensuring everyone gets time in the warm center. You're fascinated by the unspoken rules governing these arrangements. Physical contact is carefully regulated. Backs can touch backs, but faces must point outward. Married couples can embrace, but unmarried people maintain careful gaps bridged by shared blankets. Children under 7 can sleep anywhere with anyone, their innocence protecting them from scandal. Children over 7 but under 14 must sleep with same gender groups or family. These rules aren't just about propriety. They prevent conflicts that could shatter the fragile cooperation necessary for survival. The temporary nature of these alliances is striking. A man who was generous with his blanket last night might find himself welcomed into a warm group tonight. A woman who selfishly hoarded her position by the fire might find herself mysteriously squeezed toward the drafty edges. Reputation in this economy is everything. Be known as someone who shares warmth fairly, and you'll never freeze. Be known as selfish, and you might not survive winter. Some people have specialized roles in this economy. There's an old man who doesn't generate much heat himself, but knows exactly how to arrange people for maximum thermal efficiency. He's basically a sleeping consultant, paid in food and favorable positioning to organize groups. He knows that tall people should be on the outside, shorter in the middle, that certain body types radiate heat better, that some people are restless sleepers who disrupt the thermal envelope and need special positioning. The children have their own economy within the economy. They trade positions like valuable commodities. I'll give you my spot next to Fat Tom for 3 nights if you share your apple tomorrow. They've learned that their small bodies are valuable for filling gaps in adult sleeping arrangements, and they negotiate accordingly. The clever ones have multiple deals going, ensuring they're never without options. You notice certain people are thermal pariahs. That man who coughs constantly? He sleeps alone despite the cold. No one wants to catch his illness. The woman suspected of theft. She's been frozen out, literally, forced to the edges where only the desperate will share space with her. Social death in this environment can lead to actual death. The castle's justice system extends into these nighttime arrangements. The pregnancies in the castle make more sense now. You see several obviously pregnant women in premium positions, their condition earning them spots near the fire and surrounded by helpful bodies. Pregnancy is dangerous in this cold, and the community protects expecting mothers instinctively. But you also realize that some pregnancies might be strategic. A woman who times her pregnancy for winter gains 9 months of thermal privilege. There are thermal merchants too. One enterprising servant has collected extra blankets throughout the year, and now he rents them out for food, favors, or future considerations. Another has a supply of hot stones from the kitchen and distributes them based on a complex system of IOUs. The castle's thermal economy has its own inflation and deflation. A warm night devalues heat, while a particularly brutal cold snap sends prices soaring. The most heartbreaking sight is the thermal orphans, those without family, friends, or anything to trade. They huddle in the coldest corners, sharing heat with each other out of pure desperation. Yet even here you see small kindnesses. A guard accidentally drops his old cloak near them. A kitchen maid leaves a still warm pot where they can press against it. The thermal economy is harsh, but not heartless. As people finally settle into their final positions for the night, you realize you're looking at a perfect microcosm of medieval society. The warmth flows from high to low, but everyone depends on everyone else. The lord in his warm chamber depends on servants who depend on each other, who depend on the animals, who depend on the food the lord provides. It's circular, interconnected, and fragile. One breakdown in this system, a harsh lord who hoards too much, servants who won't cooperate, animals that die, and the whole structure collapses. The last negotiations of the night are happening now. Final adjustments to positions, last-minute trades of blankets for promises, children being tucked into optimal spots. Soon, the only sounds will be breathing, snoring, and the occasional cough. But the thermal economy never really sleeps. Throughout the night, bodies will shift, unconsciously maintaining the delicate balance between survival and social structure. The great hall has fallen eerily quiet, except for the occasional pop from the dying fire. And you position yourself where you can observe the night watch, that select group of servants whose entire existence revolves around keeping the flames alive through the dark hours. The firekeeper, a man named Willem, whose face bears the permanent reddish tinge of someone who spent decades inches from flames, approaches the hearth with the reverence of a priest approaching an altar. "Let it die completely," he whispers to his apprentice, a boy of perhaps 12, "and you might as well dig graves come morning." This isn't hyperbole. The cold is so intense that if the fire goes out entirely, it might take hours to rebuild it from scratch. Hours during which the temperature in the hall could drop below freezing. People have died from such failures, especially the elderly and infants who can't generate enough body heat to survive the weight. Willem's movements are economical, practiced, almost ritualistic. He doesn't just throw logs on the fire. First, he reads it, examining the color of the coals, feeling the heat patterns with his outstretched hand, even listening to the sound it makes. Each type of wood burns differently, and he's selecting pieces like a musician choosing notes. Oak for the long burn through the small hours, ash for quick heat when needed, applewood for the sweet smoke that helps cover the stench of hundreds of unwashed bodies. The apprentice watches with intense concentration as Willem demonstrates the banking technique. Using a long iron tool, he pushes the hottest coals to one side, creating a reservoir of heat that will last even if the active flames diminish. On the other side, he builds what he calls a morning fire, arranged but unlit wood that will catch easily when stirred at dawn. It's a delicate balance between conservation and maintaining enough heat to keep the hall survivable.
Every 2 hours, marked by the castle's water clock, someone must tend the fire. The shifts are staggered so no one loses too much sleep, but it's still exhausting work. You watch as Willem wakes his replacement, not with shouting or shaking, but by holding a warm stone near the man's face. Wake them too harsh in this cold, he explains, and their heart might stop from the shock. The replacement, an older servant named Marcus, rises stiffly, his joints creaking audibly in the cold. The politics of who gets fire duty are complex. It's horrible work. You lose sleep, risk burns, and spend your nights breathing smoke. But it also comes with privileges. Firekeepers eat first and best, because a weak firekeeper means a dead castle. They sleep closest to the hearth during their off hours. Most importantly, they have power. The power to bank the fire towards certain sleeping areas, to accidentally let it dim near someone who's crossed them, to ensure their friends wake to warmth. The wood supply is a constant concern. You follow Marcus down to the wood store, a room that's guarded as carefully as the treasury. Each piece of wood represents hours of labor: cutting, splitting, hauling, drying. The castle goes through nearly a tree a day in winter, and that's with careful management. Marcus selects each piece carefully, feeling for moisture content, checking for rot, estimating burn time. Wet wood is disaster. It creates more smoke than heat and can actually lower the temperature. The most dangerous part of the night is the witch's hour, between 3 and 4 in the morning. This is when the fire is at its lowest, when human body temperatures drop naturally, when most deaths occur. Willem has stories of finding people who seemed merely asleep, but were actually frozen. Their bodies still soft, but life gone. The firekeeper's vigil during this hour is especially critical. They add just enough wood to create a slight temperature rise, a thermal nudge that helps bodies make it through to dawn.
You notice the firekeepers have developed their own language of smoke signals. A certain amount of smoke means all is well. Excessive smoke might mean wet wood, a problem that needs immediate attention. Black smoke could mean something other than wood has fallen into the fire. A piece of clothing. God forbid, a person who rolled too close. The other watchers throughout the castle know these signals and respond accordingly. The relationship between the firekeepers and the sleeping castle is almost mystical. Willem claims he can tell if someone is dying by how the smoke moves around them. Death apparently creates a cold spot that affects air currents. He knows who's pregnant by how they position themselves relative to the fire, who's sick by their breathing patterns echoing in the hall, who's plotting something by their pretense of sleep while actually watching. The fire itself has moods, personalities that the keepers have named. Tonight's fire is Angry Margaret, spitting and popping more than usual, probably because of sap pockets in the wood. Last night was Lazy Catherine, a slow, steady burn that required constant coaxing. The keepers swear each fire is different, influenced by wind direction, moisture in the air, even the phases of the moon. Modern science would scoff, but these men keep hundreds alive through brutal winters, so their superstitions carry weight. The tools of the trade are surprisingly sophisticated. Willem shows you his collection. Iron pokers of different lengths for different reaches, a bellows for reviving dying embers, a special shovel for removing ash without disturbing the coals, tongs for repositioning burning logs, even a water-filled pig's bladder for emergency flame suppression. Each tool is worn smooth from use, and Willem knows their weight and balance, like a warrior knows his sword. The ash management is its own complex task. Too much ash and it smothers the fire. Too little and the coals burn too fast. The ash must be removed while still hot. Cold ash is worthless and carried to specific locations. Some goes to the soap makers, some to the gardens for fertilizer, some is kept for casting on icy paths. Nothing is wasted. The apprentice's first job is usually ash duty, teaching him the fire's patterns before he's trusted with actual flame management. Around 4 in the morning, you witness a crisis. The wind has shifted, and suddenly the hall fills with smoke as the chimney stops drawing properly. People wake coughing, children scream, and panic threatens. But Willem moves with calm precision. He knows this chimney's moods. Using a long pole with rags attached, he clears a bird's nest that's partially blocking the flue. Then he adjusts the fire's position, moving it slightly east, where the draw is better. Within minutes, the smoke clears, and the hall settles back to sleep. The firekeeper's greatest fear is the dead fire, when, despite all precautions, the flames go completely out. Willem has seen it happen twice in 40 years. Both times it took 6 hours to restart from scratch, finding dry kindling, coaxing spark from flint and steel, slowly building from ember to flame to fire. Both times people died. An elderly woman whose heart gave out from the cold, a baby who simply stopped breathing. The firekeeper responsible the second time was banished from the castle in shame. As dawn approaches, the firekeeping shifts from preservation to revival. Willem begins the morning wake, gradually building the fire larger and hotter to warm the hall for the waking castle. This must be timed perfectly. Too early and you waste wood. Too late and people wake to misery. He reads the sky through the high windows, gauging the approaching dawn by subtle changes in the darkness. The social hierarchy of waking is reflected in the fire's management. First, warmth is directed toward where the noble's servants sleep. They must wake first to prepare their master's chambers. Then toward the kitchen staff who need to begin breakfast. The lowest servants wake last to the least warmth, a daily reminder of their station. Yet Willem occasionally mismanages the fire's direction, ensuring a sick child or struggling widow gets extra warmth. These small mercies are never spoken of, but always remembered. The apprentice is now practicing his technique on a smaller fire in a brazier, learning to read the coal's color for temperature, to feel the draft patterns in the hall, to know instinctively when to add wood and when to wait. It will take years before he's trusted with a full night's watch, and even then, an experienced keeper will always be nearby. The castle's survival is too important to risk on inexperience. As you watch the night keepers work, you realize they're not just maintaining a fire, they're maintaining civilization itself. Without them, the castle would be uninhabitable from November to March. No amount of tapestries, bed curtains, or warm clothing would matter without this constant, vigilant tending of flame. They are the unsung heroes of medieval survival. Their careful work the thin line between life and death. The fire never really sleeps, and neither do its keepers. Even now, as dawn breaks and the castle begins to stir, Willem is planning for tonight, checking wood supplies, noting wind patterns, preparing for another long vigil. His apprentice watches and learns, knowing that someday the castle's survival will rest in his hands, just as it now rests in Willem's scarred, capable ones. You approach one of the castle's narrow windows, where a craftsman is installing what might be the most ingenious draft prevention system you've seen yet. The window, really just a vertical slit in 3-foot-thick stone walls, has become a complex battlefield where medieval engineers wage war against the wind, using every material and technique at their disposal. The glazier, a traveling specialist who moves between castles with his precious cargo of glass, shows you his work with obvious pride. "Glass is just the beginning," he says, holding up a piece of the wavy, greenish material that costs more per pound than silver. But medieval glass is terrible insulation. It's thin, poorly sealed, and conducted cold almost as efficiently as the stone around it. The real innovation is in the layering system, developed over centuries of freezing winters. First comes the glass itself, set in lead came that's deliberately made flexible to allow for expansion and contraction. The glazier shows you how he's packed wool soaked in beeswax into every gap between glass and stone. But that's just the first defense. Over the glass goes a frame of oiled parchment, sheep intestine, stretched thin and treated with linseed oil until it's translucent. This creates a primitive double glazing effect, trapping air between glass and parchment. Next comes what the castle calls winter shutters, thick wooden panels lined with felt, made from compressed wool and rabbit fur. These aren't the decorative shutters you might imagine, but serious defensive structures, some 3 inches thick, with leather hinges that won't freeze like metal ones would. When closed, they create another air gap, another layer of defense. But even these aren't trusted alone.
The final layer is a thick tapestry that hangs over the entire window assembly. But here's the clever part. It's not attached at the bottom. Instead, it's weighted with sand-filled leather tubes that create a seal, while still allowing the fabric to be lifted for light during the day. The sand retains heat from whatever sun gets through, releasing it slowly through the night. The servant responsible for window management, yes, that's an actual job, demonstrates the daily routine. In the morning, everything is opened in a specific order to prevent condensation from freezing. The tapestry first, then shutters, then parchment, allowing each layer to warm gradually. At night, the process reverses, each layer sealed in sequence to trap maximum air between them. Miss the timing, and ice forms between layers, actually conducting more cold into the room. Some windows have even more elaborate defenses. You're shown one where they've built what amounts to a window box on the interior, a wooden frame extending 2 feet into the room, creating a space that can be filled with straw for extra insulation. During the day, the straw is removed and the space becomes a tiny greenhouse where the kitchen grows herbs even in winter. At night, the straw returns and the window becomes just another wall. The arrow slits present special challenges. They can't be sealed completely. They're defensive structures that might be needed at any moment. In the richer chambers, you discover windows with an experimental heating system. Hollow bronze tubes run along the window frame, and hot water from the kitchen is poured through them several times a day. The metal retains heat and creates a warm barrier around the window's edge where most drafts enter. It's expensive, labor-intensive, and only partially effective. But in a world where any warmth is precious, even small gains matter. The southern windows receive different treatment from northern ones. South-facing windows might actually be opened on sunny winter days, the rare solar heat worth the temporary cold. These windows have adjustable systems, panels that can be partially opened, angled shields that direct sunlight deeper into rooms while blocking wind. The castle's architect understood solar gains centuries before anyone formalized the concept. You notice that some windows have been sealed permanently for winter, literally mortared shut with a mixture of clay, straw, and animal blood that hardens like cement. Come spring, this will be chipped away, but for now, these windows are just decorative indentations in the wall. The rooms they're in are darker, but significantly warmer. Light becomes another casualty of the war against cold. The maintenance of these window defenses is constant. Every morning, servants check for new gaps where settling or temperature changes have created openings. They carry supplies of wool, wax, and leather strips for immediate repairs. A single overlooked crack can lower a room's temperature by several degrees, so vigilance is essential. The psychological effect of windows is complex. They provide light and a connection to the outside world that prevents the castle from feeling like a tomb. But they're also sources of anxiety. Every howl of wind reminds occupants of their vulnerability. Some people prefer windowless inner chambers despite their darkness, choosing thermal security over any contact with daylight. The most innovative solution you see is in the chapel, where tall windows are necessary for the stained glass that tells religious stories.
Here, they've built a second wall of clear glass inside the stained glass, creating a 6-inch gap between them. This space is accessible through small doors, allowing servants to clean both glass surfaces and remove condensation. On special feast days, they place candles in this space, creating a glowing effect while adding a tiny bit of warmth. You climb a narrow spiral staircase to reach what might be the castle's best-kept secret, a series of small chambers where the mattress making happens. The smell hits you first: dried heather, lavender, and something earthy and animal. Here, 3 women work year-round, preparing the materials that will determine whether someone merely survives the night or actually sleeps comfortably. The head mattress maker, Agnes, shows you the hierarchy of filling materials, with the pride of someone who knows their craft, determines life and death. Feathers for lords, wool for merchants, straw for servants, and prayers for the poor, she says. But the reality is far more complex. She shows you samples of each, and the differences are staggering. The noble feather beds are engineering marvels. It takes the down from over 300 geese to fill a single mattress. And not just any feathers, only the soft undercoating from the breast, plucked at specific times of year when they're at their fullest. Agnes shows you how she tests each batch, checking for quill content, which pokes through fabric, oil levels, too much and they smell, too little and they break down. And most importantly, loft, the ability to trap air. A good feather bed can be compressed to 1/4 of its size, but springs back to full thickness, creating thousands of tiny air pockets that insulate better than anything else available. But feathers are problematic. They absorb moisture from sweating bodies and can become breeding grounds for mites and fungus. Agnes shows you her treatment process, heating the feathers in special copper vessels to kill parasites, mixing them with dried herbs that repel insects, and most surprisingly, adding small amounts of sulfur that prevent decomposition. The smell is masked with rose petals and lavender, but the chemistry is what matters. The wool mattresses for the middle ranks require different expertise. Not all wool is equal. Sheep from the highlands produce denser wool that insulates better, while lowland sheep give softer wool that's more comfortable but less warm. Agnes creates custom blends, mixing coarse and fine, adding rabbit fur for softness or horsehair for structure. She shows you how she cards the wool, creating aligned fibers that maintain loft longer than random stuffing. The real innovation is in the layering. A wool mattress isn't just a bag stuffed with wool, it's built in sections, each with different densities. The bottom layer is packed tight for support, the middle layer looser for comfort, and the top layer is the finest wool for softness. Between each layer, she places dried herbs. Not just for scent, but because many have antimicrobial properties that extend the mattress's life. The straw mattresses for common servants seem simple by comparison, but Agnes shows you tricks developed over generations. The straw must be cut at the right time. Too green and it rots, too dry and it crumbles to dust within weeks. It's mixed with dried bracken for spring, heather for structure, and surprisingly, dried seaweed when they can get it. The seaweed contains salts that prevent mold and deter insects. She demonstrates the proper stuffing technique, not just shoving straw into a bag, but creating organized bundles that maintain structure. The straw is arranged in overlapping layers, like thatching a roof, so it doesn't shift and create cold spots. A well-made straw mattress can last a full winter, while a poorly made one becomes a useless sack within weeks. The mattress covers themselves are crucial. The noble beds have tightly woven linen that prevents feathers from escaping, while still breathing enough to prevent moisture buildup. The middle ranks get looser linen or canvas. The poor make do with whatever fabric they can salvage, often creating patchwork covers that leak filling constantly. Agnes shows you her repair kit. Needles of various sizes, threads of different weights, patches of every possible fabric. The seasonal cycle of mattress maintenance is exhausting. In spring, all mattresses are opened, their contents spread in the sun to dry and air. This is when new materials are added, old ones replaced. In summer, the emphasis is on thinning them for coolness. In autumn, they're rebuilt for maximum loft. And in winter, constant repairs keep them functional as bodies compress them night after night. The politics of mattresses are vicious. A good mattress can be someone's most valuable possession, worth more than their yearly wages. They're inherited, fought over, stolen. Agnes has to maintain strict security over her supplies. A desperate servant might steal enough feathers for their own bed, ruining a noble's mattress in the process. She shows you her locked storage rooms, each material guarded based on its value. The most interesting innovation is the adjustable mattress. Some clever noble commissioned a mattress with removable sections. Extra padding can be added on cold nights, removed on warmer ones. The sections connect with horn toggles and leather straps, allowing customization based on season and personal preference. It's the medieval equivalent of an adjustable bed, and everyone wants one. Disease adds another layer of complexity. When someone dies of illness, their mattress must be burned. The materials are too contaminated to salvage. But in winter, losing a mattress might mean freezing, so Agnes has developed purification techniques. She fumigates mattresses with burning sulfur and herbs, boils coverings in lye, and sometimes even rebuilds them entirely, saving what she can, while ensuring disease doesn't spread. Some rooms transform entirely in purpose. The summer dining hall becomes a dormitory. The music room becomes a wool storage area. The abandoned chambers become resource mines. Servants strip them of anything burnable, movable, or useful. Wooden decorations become firewood. Unused furniture is broken up for fuel or barricades against drafts. It's controlled demolition of summer comfort for winter survival. The kitchen becomes the castle's beating heart in winter. Everyone finds excuses to visit, lingering near the ovens, volunteering for tasks that keep them close to the heat. The cooks gain enormous power during these months. The ability to ban someone from the kitchen is essentially a death threat. You see nobles who wouldn't normally acknowledge a cook's existence now bringing them gifts, cultivating relationships that guarantee kitchen access. The stable area experiences an influx of human residents. Rooms directly above the horses, previously considered undesirable due to smell and noise, become premium real estate. The fermentation heat from composting hay and manure below creates a microclimate that's surprisingly comfortable. Nobles hold their noses and relocate their servants here, and some even claim chambers for themselves, dignity sacrificed for warmth. The movement patterns create new social dynamics. People who never interact in summer are suddenly sharing spaces. A proud knight finds himself sleeping next to a merchant he despises. A lady's maid shares a chamber with a scullery girl she'd normally never acknowledge. These forced proximities create unexpected alliances and conflicts, reshaping the castle's social structure for the winter months. The abandoned areas become forbidden zones. Without heat and human presence, they quickly become genuinely dangerous. Moisture condenses and freezes on walls. Roofs develop ice dams that can collapse. Pipes, where they exist, burst. Rats move in, followed by other vermin. Entering these areas requires permission and usually an escort, as people have been known to get lost in the cold, dark passages and freeze to death just yards from help. The chapel sees interesting negotiations. It must remain accessible for religious services, but it's too large to heat continuously. The solution is scheduled warming. Fires are lit 2 hours before services, maintained during worship, then allowed to die. People dress in their warmest clothes for church, and services are shortened in extreme cold. Some desperate souls hide in the chapel after services, trying to absorb the last heat from dying fires. The defensive implications of this migration worry the castle's military commander. With everyone concentrated in certain areas, Large sections of walls go unguarded. The solution is a rotation of patrols who make quick circuits through cold zones, checking for enemies while trying not to freeze themselves. These patrols are punishment duty, given to soldiers who've misbehaved. A week of cold patrol usually ensures better behavior. The psychological effect of this compression is significant. Summer's relative privacy disappears entirely. Every conversation is overheard, every action observed. Couples who enjoyed separate chambers in summer now share not just rooms, but beds with others. The lack of privacy drives some to madness. Winter sees more fights, more accusations of theft, more general discord than any other season. But there's also unexpected intimacy. Forced together, people share stories, skills, and secrets. Children who barely knew each other become lifelong friends. Adults discover common interests. Romances bloom in the warmth of shared spaces. The castle's oral history is largely created during these winter months, when storytelling becomes the primary entertainment. By January, the migration is complete. The castle that houses 300 in summer has effectively shrunk to a third of its size. Entire wings stand empty and frozen, looking like abandoned ruins attached to the living quarters. From outside, you can actually see which parts are occupied. Wisps of smoke, glows from windows, while the rest stands dark and dead. You're granted access to the castle's most valuable warming technology when the marshal, impressed by your interest, leads you to a locked storage room that smells of leather and heated stone. Here, arranged on shelves like precious artifacts, are dozens of leather-wrapped stones, each one tagged with a small piece of parchment indicating its properties. Holds heat 4 hours. Best for joint pain. Baby safe. Crackers. Kitchen only. This is medieval thermal battery technology at its most sophisticated. The castle's hot stone manager, yes, that's a real position, is a widow named Marjorie, who inherited the job from her mother. She shows you her collection with the pride of a master craftsman. Not all stones are equal for warming purposes. She has river stones, worn smooth that won't snag fabric, flat stones for placing under bedding, round stones for holding against the body, and special stones with natural hollows that cut perfectly around aching joints. The science, though they don't call it that, is remarkably advanced. Marjorie knows that different stones hold heat differently. Granite retains heat longest, but takes forever to warm. Sandstone heats quickly, but cools just as fast. The prize pieces are chunks of soapstone imported from Norway at enormous expense. They hold steady heat for 6 hours and never get hot enough to burn. She has 20 of these, each one guarded like treasure. The preparation process begins at dawn. Stones are placed in special niches built into the kitchen ovens, where they slowly heat throughout the day. But timing is everything. Too hot, and they'll burn flesh or set bedding on fire. Too cool, and they're useless by midnight. Marjorie has developed a testing system using drops of water. The sizzle pattern tells her exactly how hot a stone is and how long it will retain useful heat. The wrapping is equally crucial. Each stone has its own custom leather pouch, sewn to fit perfectly with minimal air gaps that would reduce efficiency. The leather is treated with beeswax to prevent moisture damage and lined with wool for comfort. Some pouches have straps for securing to specific body parts, a kidney warmer that ties around the waist, a foot warmer with ankle straps, even a small neck warmer that helps with headaches. Distribution follows strict protocols. The lord and lady get the Norwegian soapstone naturally. High-ranking nobles get granite. Servants make do with common fieldstone. But here's where it gets interesting. Medical need sometimes trumps rank. That pregnant noblewoman gets priority regardless of status. The old soldier with battle wounds that ache in cold receives special consideration. Children with fevers get stones calibrated to very specific temperatures. The innovation extends to specialized designs. You're shown stones with grooves carved into them. When wrapped in damp cloth, they provide moist heat for respiratory ailments. Flat stones with rough surfaces are used to warm and dry boots simultaneously. One clever design has two stones connected by a leather strap, creating a warming saddle that drapes over shoulders. The portability creates a secondary economy. Servants carry wrapped stones as they work, tucking them under aprons or inside sleeves. A warm stone becomes currency, worth a meal, a favor, a better sleeping spot. You watch a guard trade his freshly heated stone for a double portion of breakfast. The kitchen staff with easiest access to the ovens become power brokers in this thermal economy. But the most ingenious use is in the beds. Marjorie shows you the technique for creating a heat gradient using multiple stones. Large, slow-cooling stones go at the feet where circulation is poorest, medium stones at the hips and lower back. Small, carefully temperature-controlled stones near the chest and head. Arranged properly, they create a cocoon of warmth that lasts most of the night. The dangers are real and carefully managed. Stories circulate of people burned by overheated stones, beds set ablaze by cracked stones that leaked hot fragments, even deaths from stones that released toxic gases when heated. Certain rocks from the mines contain minerals that become poisonous at high temperatures. Marjorie tests every new stone by heating it alone in a controlled environment first. The maintenance of the stones is constant work. They must be cleaned after each use to prevent disease transmission. Cracked stones are immediately retired. A hairline fracture can become an explosion of hot fragments. The leather pouches need regular treatment to prevent hardening and cracking. It's a full-time job just maintaining this thermal arsenal. Medical applications have developed into their own speciality. The castle's healer works closely with Marjorie to prescribe specific stones for ailments. Smooth round stones for muscle aches, flat stones for chest congestion, small stones for earaches. They've even developed a treatment for childbirth, a sequence of stones at different temperatures applied to help with contractions and recovery. The nighttime stone run is a carefully choreographed operation. As darkness falls, servants fan out through the castle carrying baskets of wrapped stones. They know every recipient, every preference, every special need. The stones must be delivered at exactly the right time. Too early and they cool before sleep. Too late and people have already suffered through the coldest part of settling into bed. You witness one particularly touching scene. A grandmother teaching her granddaughter the family stone warming tradition. Each family has their own techniques, their own preferred stones, their own wrapping methods, passed down through generations. The child learns to test temperature with her inner wrist, to wrap with exactly the right tension, to know which family members need what type of heat. Dawn is breaking, and you position yourself in the Great Hall to witness what might be the most shocking part of medieval castle mornings. The collective resurrection from near-frozen death to functional humanity. The first sounds aren't roosters or bells, but a symphony of coughing, groaning and cracking joints as 300 bodies attempt to move after a night of rigid cold. The temperature in the hall has dropped to perhaps 35 degrees, and everyone's breath creates a fog bank at ceiling level. The firekeeper's apprentice is already at work, stirring the banked coals with practiced movements, coaxing flames back to life. But it will be an hour before the hall feels any real warmth. In the meantime, you watch the medieval morning ritual that would horrify modern sensibilities, but represents survival adaptation at its finest. Nobody moves quickly. Fast movement in extreme cold can trigger heart attacks, and everyone knows someone who died from rising too fast on a winter morning. Instead, there's a gradual process of awakening. First, fingers and toes are flexed under blankets, then slow stretches, Finally, careful emergence from whatever warmth cocoon they've created. The elderly are helped by younger relatives, their joints so stiff they literally cannot move without assistance. The first challenge is the chamber pots, which are frozen solid overnight. You watch as servants carry them to the kitchen to be thawed by the fires. Until then, the garderobes must be used. But these are torture chambers of ice. The stone seats are so cold they can cause frostbite, and more than one person has been found frozen to the seat, their body heat creating just enough melt to freeze them in place. People wrap themselves in everything they own just to relieve themselves. The psychological adjustment is as difficult as the physical. People wake disoriented from the cold, some having experienced hypothermic hallucinations during the night. Children cry continuously, their small bodies unable to regulate temperature properly after hours of cold. The elderly sit stunned, taking sometimes an hour to become fully conscious. Even the healthy young adults move like sleepwalkers for the first 30 minutes. Breakfast becomes a medical necessity rather than a meal. The kitchen has been preparing since before dawn, heating wine and ale. Water would freeze in the stomach, people believe. Warming yesterday's bread by the fires, melting fat for porridge that's more about calories than taste. The first food is distributed based on medical need. Children, elderly, and pregnant women first. The warmth of the food is more important than its nutrition. People hold bowls against their bodies, breathe the steam, use the heated pottery as hand warmers. The social dynamics of morning are different from night. The careful sleeping arrangements dissolve into irritable chaos as people struggle to find their belongings in the dim light. Arguments break out over stolen blankets, missing shoes, and invaded space. The camaraderie of shared survival gives way to the selfishness of discomfort. Fights are common, though usually brief. Nobody has energy for sustained conflict. The smell is overwhelming. 300 people who've slept in their clothes, sweated through the night, and haven't properly washed in weeks, create an atmosphere that would make modern people retch. The herbs scattered in the rushes help, as does the smoke from the fire. But the combination of unwashed bodies, dogs, stale food, and human waste is inescapable. People believe the smell itself can cause disease, so they carry pouches of strong herbs to breathe through. The morning injuries are tallied like battle casualties. Frostbitten fingers and toes are common, treated with gradual warming that causes excruciating pain. Several people can't walk, their feet too damaged from cold. One elderly man didn't wake at all, found peaceful but frozen. A baby survived, but won't stop shaking. These are recorded in the castle's records. Statistics of war against winter. The class divisions become stark in morning light. Nobles emerge from their chambers looking merely dishevelled, warmed by their better beds and warming pans. The middle ranks look haggard but functional. The poor look like survivors of a disaster, which, in a way, they are. The visual contrast is striking. The same castle contains people who slept in relative comfort and those who barely survived. The morning migrations begin immediately. Everyone seeks heat sources. The kitchen becomes packed with people finding excuses to be there. The stables fill with those checking on animals that don't need checking. The forge, as soon as it's lit, attracts crowds who watch the blacksmith work. Even the laundry, with its boiling vats, becomes a gathering place. Work in winter is as much about finding warm places to exist as accomplishing tasks. The restoration of humanity is gradual but remarkable. As warmth returns to bodies and hot food fills stomachs, people transform. Conversation resumes. Laughter, impossible an hour ago, begins to bubble up. Children stop crying and start playing. By full daylight, the castle resembles something like normal life, though everyone knows that in 12 hours, they'll face the same ordeal again.
You spend your day exploring the castle's architectural evolution, and the steward shows you something remarkable. The old castle, built 200 years ago, and the new additions, built just 50 years past. The difference in design philosophy is staggering. Where the old builders created massive halls impossible to heat, the new architects designed smaller, compartmentalized spaces. Where the old castle has soaring ceilings that trap heat uselessly above, the new sections have lower ceilings that keep warmth at human level. The most innovative addition is the winter wing, a section designed specifically for cold weather habitation. The rooms are smaller, with interior corridors instead of exterior ones. Windows face south exclusively. Most brilliantly, the entire wing is built around a central chimney mass that serves 6 fireplaces on different levels. The chimney structure acts like a massive heat battery, its stones warming all the surrounding rooms. It's the medieval equivalent of passive solar design, though nobody would call it that. In the kitchen wing, you discover that newer ovens have been built with heating channels that run through walls to adjacent rooms. It's not quite the Roman hypocaust system, but it's moving in that direction. The baker's quarters, positioned directly above the main ovens, are reportedly the warmest rooms in the castle. So warm that the baker's family sleeps with windows cracked even in winter, a luxury that makes them the envy of everyone. The newest innovation is double walls. In the Lord's recently renovated tower, builders created a gap between inner and outer walls, filled with a mixture of wool, straw, and surprisingly, seashells that were crushed and mixed with lime. This insulation is so effective that a single brazier can keep the room comfortable. The investment was enormous. It cost more than feeding the entire castle for a year. But the fuel savings will recoup the cost within a decade. You're shown plans for future improvements that seem almost fantastical. An architect from Italy has proposed a system of copper pipes that would carry hot water from the kitchen through walls to heat rooms. Another suggests building the entire castle around a central courtyard that could be covered with oiled cloth in winter, creating a massive greenhouse effect. Most ambitious is a plan to redirect a hot spring from 2 miles away, though the engineering challenges seem insurmountable. The stable complex has seen the most practical innovations. The new design stacks human quarters directly above, beside, and even between animal stalls. Ventilation shafts cleverly extract smell while retaining heat. The hay storage is positioned to provide insulation for human spaces. Even the manure management system is designed to maximize heat generation through controlled composting. It's ugly and smells terrible, but it's warm. The defensive requirements constantly conflict with heating needs. Every improvement for warmth, smaller windows, interior walls, lower ceilings, makes the castle less defensible. The military commanders argue constantly with the domestic managers. The compromise solutions are ingenious, if imperfect. Windows that can be quickly bricked up, removable interior walls that can be burned for fuel during sieges, ceiling that can be raised on pulleys during summer. The room arrangements in newer sections follow thermal logic rather than social hierarchy. Bedchambers are clustered together, sharing walls to maximize heat retention. Storage rooms that don't need heating are positioned on exterior walls as buffer zones. The garde-robes are built into exterior walls where the cold actually helps with smell management. Every placement decision considers thermal efficiency. The most successful innovation has been the warm room, a single chamber kept heated continuously throughout winter,
as a refuge. When someone is dangerously cold, they're brought here to recover. New mothers stay here with infants for their first week. The sick recuperate here. It's communal by necessity, with strict rules about who can use it and for how long. Maintaining this one warm room takes as much fuel as heating 3 normal rooms, but it saves lives. You discover that different castles are experimenting with different solutions, and there's actually communication between them about what works. The steward corresponds with his counterparts at other castles, sharing innovations and failures. There's talk of a gathering next summer where castle builders will meet to discuss winter heating solutions. It's the beginning of what might be called building science, though it won't be formalized for centuries. The failures are as instructive as the successes. One castle tried to heat rooms by running chimney flues through walls, but the system cracked from thermal expansion and nearly burned the castle down. Another attempted to use mirrors to reflect sunlight deeper into rooms, but the mirrors were too expensive and broke from temperature changes. A castle near the coast tried using dried seaweed as insulation, but it attracted devastating amounts of vermin. The cost of these improvements is staggering. The Lord has spent more on heating innovations in the past decade than on military defenses. But the calculation is simple. A castle that can't be inhabited in winter is useless, no matter how strong its walls. The investment in comfort is actually an investment in strategic capability. A warm garrison fights better than a frozen one.
The social implications of architectural changes are profound.
As rooms become more comfortable, privacy increases. Nobles no longer need to sleep in the Great Hall for warmth, changing the entire dynamic of castle life. Servants get dedicated quarters instead of sleeping wherever they can find space. The architectural evolution is driving social evolution, creating a more stratified, but also more humane living environment. You're particularly impressed by the children's nursery in the new wing. It's positioned to get morning sun, has lower ceilings for better heat retention, and features an innovative play area where children can be active even in winter. The walls are painted with bright scenes, combating the psychological darkness of winter. It's recognition that keeping children warm and healthy requires different solutions than adults. The chapel has received special attention in renovations. New heating channels run under the floor, making kneeling for prayer bearable. The altar area has reflective metal sheets behind it that radiate heat from candles back toward the congregation. Even the holy water font has been redesigned with a double wall to prevent freezing. God's house must be comfortable enough for extended worship. Looking at the plans and innovations, you realize you're witnessing the slow transformation of the castle from pure military fortification to something approaching a livable home. Each generation makes small improvements, learning from failures, building on successes. In another century or two, castles will have evolved into manor houses where comfort equals or exceeds defense as a priority. She explains the mental preparations that begin in autumn, teaching children to expect cold rather than fear it. Building anticipation for winter activities, ice sliding, snow sculpting, the special foods only available when preservation is natural. Reframing winter from a season of death to a season of different life. The mind that expects suffering will suffer more than the mind that expects challenge. The knowledge she holds is encyclopedic and practical. Which herbs actually warm the blood versus which just create a sensation of warmth. How to recognize the different stages of hypothermia in others and yourself. The exact color of fingernails that indicates dangerous cold exposure. The sound breathing makes when lungs are starting to freeze. The difference between the tired that means you need rest and the tired that means you're dying. But what's most striking is her acceptance of loss. She's buried 7 children, 3 husbands, countless friends, many from cold. Yet she doesn't speak of winter as evil. The cold takes who it will take, she says. Fighting that truth wastes energy better spent on surviving. This isn't callousness. She mourns every loss. But pragmatic acceptance that allows focus on the living rather than rage against the inevitable. She shares the old stories, the generational wisdom encoded in tales and songs. The story of the Ice King who must be appeased with offerings of warmth. A metaphorical teaching about sharing resources. The ballad of the frozen knight who survived 3 days in snow by never stopping movement. A literal survival technique disguised as entertainment. These stories carry survival information across generations more effectively than any manual.
As your final night in the castle approaches, you find yourself in the solar with the castle's eldest inhabitant, a woman of perhaps 80 winters who has lived here since birth. Lady Eleanor, they call her, though she was born a servant's daughter. Through marriages, survival, and sheer endurance, she's outlived everyone and now holds a unique position. The castle's living memory of how to survive winter. Her knowledge is so valuable that she eats at the high table and sleeps in a chamber near the Lord's family. Her wisdom worth more than noble blood. You want to know the real secret? She says, her voice barely above a whisper, but carrying absolute authority. It's not the fires, or the furs, or the stones. It's accepting that cold is not your enemy. It simply is. Fighting it exhausts you. Hating it weakens you. But accepting it, learning to move with it instead of against it, that's how you see spring again. She tells you about the winters that tested this philosophy. The year the Thames froze so solid that markets were held on the ice. The winter when wolves, driven by hunger, actually entered the castle and had to be fought in the Great Hall. The 3-month freeze when they burned furniture, then doors, then finally parts of the roof to stay alive. Each survival came not from conquering cold but from adapting to it. The psychological strategies are as elaborate as the physical ones. She describes the winter festivals they've created, not despite the cold, but because of it. The Feast of Flames in January, where everyone contributes one piece of wood to create a bonfire in the courtyard that burns all night. The storytelling competitions, where the best tale teller wins an extra blanket. The communal singing that generates both physical warmth and emotional heat. These aren't distractions from winter. They're celebrations of surviving it. The community bonds forged by winter shape everything. She explains how feuds are set aside come November, because grudges are luxuries that might kill everyone. How young men who compete viciously in summer will share their last piece of bread in winter. How the castle's entire social structure becomes fluid when survival is at stake. Winter doesn't just test individuals, it creates and recreates the community. Her predictions for winter's future are interesting. She's seen the gradual improvements. Better windows, warmer rooms, more efficient fires. But she worries that as comfort increases, the knowledge of how to survive without it diminishes. What happens, she asks, when people forget that cold can kill? When they lose the skills, the mental toughness, the community bonds that extreme cold creates? It's a prescient worry about the loss of hard-won survival wisdom. As midnight approaches and the castle prepares for another night's battle with cold, Lady Eleanor shares one final piece of wisdom. Every morning you wake is a victory. Every person who wakes with you is a blessing. Every fire that still burns is a miracle. Gratitude for these simple things. That's what makes winter bearable. Not the warmth you wish you had, but thankfulness for the warmth you do have. You watch as she prepares for sleep with movements refined over 8 decades. The precise angle she positions her bed, the exact arrangement of her coverings.
The small rituals, touching a charm, murmuring a prayer, placing lavender under her pillow. These aren't superstitions, but psychological anchors, repeated actions that tell her body and mind that she's safe, she's prepared. She will wake tomorrow. The castle settles into its nighttime rhythm one last time for you. The fires are banked, the stones distributed, the bodies arranged in their complex patterns of survival. 300 souls preparing to unconsciously fight for their lives through another frozen night. But now you understand. This isn't just survival. It's a testament to human ingenuity, community, and sheer stubborn refusal to let nature win. Tomorrow, some will wake and some won't. Spring will come, eventually, and the castle will transform again into something more recognizable to modern eyes. But for now, in the depth of winter, this is humanity at its most basic and most noble. People keeping each other alive through the simple act of sharing warmth. The castle grows quieter now, settling like a great beast into its nighttime slumber. Your eyelids grow heavy as you imagine those ancient stones releasing the last of their stored warmth into the darkness. The fire in the great hall has been banked for the night, glowing coals pulsing like a slow heartbeat at the center of all those sleeping souls. Somewhere in the walls, mice rustle through the rushes, and in the stables below, horses shift and sigh in their sleep, their breath creating small clouds in the cold air. The night watch makes his rounds, footsteps echoing softly through empty corridors, checking that fires still glow, that doors remain barred, that everyone who should be breathing still is. Let your body relax now, feeling the warmth of your own bed, appreciating the gentle miracle of your modern heating, your insulated walls, your windows that keep the cold at bay without thinking. You've traveled through time tonight. Witness the incredible resilience of people who faced winter without any of our conveniences and survived through community, ingenuity, and sheer determination. The medieval castle fades now, dissolving back into history. But the lessons remain. That humans have always found ways to survive together. That warmth shared is life preserved. That every morning we wake is indeed a small victory. Your breathing deepens. Your mind drifts. And somewhere in that space between waking and sleeping, you might still hear the distant crackle of a medieval fire, the whisper of wind through stone, the quiet breathing of hundreds of souls, making it through one more winter night. Sleep well, modern traveler. You're warm. You're safe. And spring always comes again.